Hello everybody, my name is IBRAHIMI and I'm going to talk about the human brain and real estate, such as the analyze of the relationship between qualitative space and price. First of all, I would like you to introduce with some keywords or some terms which are going to be often mentioned during the study. Such as real estate, mental well-being, neuro-architecture, brain, public space. All these words are going to be emphasized and explained better on the other slide during the whole presentation. Just for a little introduction, I would like to emphasize the reciprocal relationship between the built environment and the individual. A relationship that proves the fact that it is the environment that forms our life. This statement is well admitted from Richard Neutra in 1954 in his edition Survival Design. Richard Neutra states that as human beings we can only be separated from our environment in the abstract way in which we separate the water of two tributaries which have flowed together in a common riverbed. So we can easily understand that there is no way to disconnect or to separate these two terms, built environment and the individual. So beginning from the relationship mentioned in the previous slides between the human being and the environment or built environment, and then beginning from the tendencies that suggest the collaboration process of designing with other disciplines, today we can easily evidence the human-oriented attitudes of architecture and urban planning. Alvar Aalto was first noticed this phenomena in 1914 in his edition Humanization of Architecture. He explained, beginning from the functionalism and rationalism, the path towards the humanization of architecture. First of all, he says that the problem is not with the rationalization itself, but the wrongness lies in the fact that the rationalization has not gone deep enough. He admits the fact that instead of fighting a rational mentality, the newest phase of modern architecture tries to project rational methods from the technical fields out to human and psychological fields. He emphasized that technical functionalism is correct only if enlarged to cover even the psychological field. That is the only way to humanize architecture. So, there is an interaction of many disciplines which, by virtue of having the sense of the individual, work to achieve the effective environment-human-being relationship, which in the end for sure aims the improvement of mental well-being to enhance the quality of life. Then going to the main purpose, as mentioned above, the study is focused on the space and man, two different but closely related elements that will be oriented toward the real estate term, and then specifically based on the organization of common public spaces in the neighborhood as a special element of urban space. Will be further studied the relationship created by the sale of property and the quality of space. Methodologically, the study is based on two basic directions. The first one is the theoretical one, and the second one is the practical one. Explaining the theoretical direction, first, the research considers brain and body as the binomial not separable. According to Gjergj's principles. Gjergj is a trained neurologist who, to avoid false guesses, suggests not sharing the brain and the brain from the body and vice versa, but their treatment as a compact nucleus that interacts with surrounding space. And second, the research studies the relationship between the brain, body, and the environment in the real estate terms. This to determine the local context of the elements of the space that will have a great impact of the sale of private property. This discourse will be implemented practically through the resident surveys, which, after defining the strength in which urban development space will be provided, will be expressed for the possibility of selling the apartment after a possible implementation of these requirements. The practical direction, or explaining the practical direction, research refers to two main moments. First, in collaboration with the students of Faculty of Architecture and Urbanism at the Polytechnic University of Tirana, it has been experimented the commons public space formed by the prefabricated residential block at the Congression Street, a neighborhood in Tirana. A final product will generate public space at two different levels based on passive or active urban development criteria, aimed to create a qualitative space that it tends to increase the inhabitant living standards. Thus, the space will be dealt with based on two theoretical concepts. The first uses the empty space of a residential block based on active urban development parameters where mostly arithmetic activities will be generated, while the second uses the same space which based on the passive urban development parameters expects to generate sedentary activity. The second stage is related to the testing of the respective proposals. The same studios used the survey type model, interviewed the residents of the area in question to get conclusions that would be related to the approach that the quality of space and the organization's way of dealing the sale of property in the area. Then the last part will be the conclusion, which emerge from the individual, public space, and real estate relationship based on the biology of the human structure, the principles of neuroscience, and on the way how the individual experiences the space to understand the pace and which property is acquired or sold in a defined context. Then, according to a theoretical and experimental background, this study orients theoretical approaches to the principles that define the quality of the common space by focusing on the relationship creating between the built environment and human structure. Through the principles of neuroscience affected by the behavior of the brain body in relation to the surrounding space, the research aims to show how the individual perceives and reacts to the quality of the built environment. Further, in the last part, a special importance will be given to the interaction between the space quality and the logic of the sale of property. So, as well as research in general, theoretical and experimental discourse will be based on the analysis of its main points, elaborating the trinomial of human structure, built environment, and real estate. This attitude will be treated in two directions, in terms of theoretical and experimental practical views to be considered are First, the logic of the qualitative space for the common property, so-called public space in the neighborhood through which it is given a certain character to the typical interventions based on the typology of the functions it needs. The second point to be considered is the way that the quality of space affects the mental health, focusing on the collaboration of architecture with other science oriented to enhance its human trait. Thus, the space to brain connection will be evident. The third point to be considered is space function that claims to increase the quality of life by increasing the quality of space. Thus, the common space will be treated according to two different approaches that relate to its use and the activities to be carried out in it, offering a square or of active or passive character, depending on the proposed case. Theoretical basis is practical tested by conducting a residential and transit tests in the area. So the study will be oriented toward the solution of the common space to increase its quality. And the last point to be considered is the logic of selling property, as well as how the quality of the common space affects its value. Further, this approach will be verified practically between resident and random passers on surveys that will be expressed on the perception of the public space, its quality, and the tendency of property sales based on these aspects. On the next slide, I'm going to explain all the point of views which I have mentioned in the previous slide, and which are well considered on the study. First is the qualitative space. Beginning to explain the qualitative space, we are going to admit that I'm going to admit that the discussion begins on the public space, which should not be defined as the gap between buildings or of a residential block or beyond. It is characterized by a proper capacity to generate social activities or communication between residents or passers-by, which turns it into a fundamental space for demanding the social life of the city in general. Thus, it is evident that this type of space is of particular importance as regards to the quality of life of individuals and especially their mental well-being. This is one of the reasons why it is worth considering the quality of urban space, focusing on their comfort and attractiveness. So it is worth considering the assessment made by Projects for Public Spaces in 2018. This is a diagram which developed, this is a place diagram development by PPS, or the Public Space Project for Public Spaces. The diagram is a tool to help people in judging any place based in its qualities. So, the place diagram by Projects for Public Spaces, which advise to imagine that the center circle on the diagram is a specific place that a street corner or a playground or a plaza outside the building. You can evaluate that place according to 4 criteria in the orange ring. In the ring outside, these main criteria are number of intuitive or qualitative aspects by which to judge a place. The next outer ring shows the quantitative aspects that can be measured by statistics or research. So, It should be emphasized that regardless of the study data, the quality of public space depends on the relationship it creates with the users. Above all, there is a spiritual connection between space and the individual who possesses the ability from space to place translation. This shift would be further oriented toward a more accurate definition of qualitative space, also based on the concept of genius logic and derived from Norbert Schulz, which emphasized that the concrete term to refer to the environment is place, addressing to the latter as an integrated part of human existence. Further, by asking the question of what this term means, he claims, obviously, we mean something more than an abstract location. We mean a totally made up of concrete things having material substance, shape, texture and color. Together these things determine an environmental character which is the essence of place. Thus, there is a clear relationship between the environment of the space and the space where he lives or where the human being lives, works or frequents, a relationship that affects the quality of human life as a result of the way the human structure perceives the character of the space surrounding it. The second point of view was the relationship between built environment and mental well-being. The explanation of this relationship becomes from the addition of David Halpern, built environment and mental well-being more than bricks and mortar. He analyzed the reciprocal relationship between the two components above. He posed some fundamental questions which have a special value in the design process. Specifically, he asks, what is really true that we as designers only had to concern ourselves with aesthetic? It seems like a wonderful freedom, but what if we were wrong? What if of people who had to live in our design? What it really was it really so arbitrary if the building was for 10 people or 1,000? If the road went straight or around, or the city was built in one way or another? Was it really true that the built environment did not affect our social behavior and well-being? Thus, no matter how little the social elements are dealt with in the project, practices in the Albanian University curricula in general, their true value can easily be evidenced. To make a clearer picture of these two dimensions, namely in the built environment and mental health, it is important to give the relevant definition. First, mental health and well-being is the state in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with normal stresses of life, can work productively, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community, is a definition by the World Health Organization. And the second definition considers the term built environment, which has been defined as the human-made space in which people live, work, and recreate on a day-to-day basis. This is a definition made by Journal of Environmental Health. So, we can clearly understand that the reciprocal relationship these two elements create with each other affects the quality of life of the individual. So before going to explain the third point of view, which is related to qualitative space in terms of mental well-being. I would like to introduce you with the area under the study. The area under the study is the area showed in the photography. The yellow one is the yellow line is the boundary of the zone. The zone is made by prefabricated buildings, 6-floor prefabricated buildings constructed on the socialist period on Tirana, and in the middle of the building is a common space or a public area, which for the moment is not is in a not really good condition. Now, going on the qualitative space in terms of mental well-being, it is important to emphasize that after highlighting the importance of space characteristic in the quality of life, as well as the relationship between the built environment and mental health, the study aims to the concentrating on public space as part of the built environment. Further, after the consideration of local context, the research aims at defining the architectural characteristic in which the areas should be developed. So, as noted above, the public space determined by the prefabricated residential block at Street Congress in Lucius, near the Iniziatori Square, a very well-known square in Tirana, has been studied. So, this space has been reviewed in collaboration with graduate students at the Faculty of Architecture and Urban Planning in Tirana, who have given their ideas on two types of development of the public space in the residential block. The first used the empty space of the residential block based on activities urban parameters where mostly rhythmic activities will be generated, while the second uses the same space based on the passive urban development parameters expects to generate a sedentary life. Thus, variants of different functions have been proceed, which are further tested on the inhabitants of the area to reach the main conclusion of the research. It is this moment that examines the typology of the public space as well as its qualitative characteristic versus the relevant context, which is defined by the way of life of the inhabitants. So, initially between the interventions, the quality of common space has been increased, while residents have been questioned to decode the typology of interventions that best affect their quality of life, regardless of the quality of its own. It should be emphasized that the main purpose of the study remains to examine in a defined context of mental health, constructing environment by specifically testing interventions categories based on the existing theories. The last point of view on the theoretical and practical background of the study is the qualitative space, but in terms of real estate. So, beginning from Evans in 2003, published in the Journal of Public Health, he said that the built environment has direct and indirect effect on the mental health. The way in which our human structure is made, and moreover how the space generally affects the human brain, categorizes the life quality of individuals. The latter, however, remains a personal approach which has been identified in the study as a result of files survived. On the other hand, the aim of the research was to find out how much the residents of the zone or different transit zones in the area were generally sensitive to the quality of the public space, but also the sale and purchase of the property of it only if it only analyzes the quality criteria on built environment. So, to set it apart, study has analyzed the trinomial, mental health, built environment, and real estate, or otherwise is brain, space, real estate. In this slide, the show are presented the intervention. As mentioned before, the space in the middle of the building has been reviewed in collaboration with graduate students at the Faculty of Architecture and Urban Planning in Tirana. They have given their ideas on two types of development of the public space in this residential block. The first used the empty space of the residential block based on urban parameters where mostly rhythmic activities will be generated. In this way are treated the interventions on the left part of the slide, and in the right part of the slide, the same space is used and the interventions are made based on the passive urban development parameters to generate sedentary activities. There are two variants of different nature functions that had been perceived in the area. Then the variants or these interventions are tested in the inhabitants or in passers-by of the area. Then, after the interventions in terms of design, made in collaboration with the students of Faculty of Architecture and Urban Planning in Tirana, came out the results. The results are shown in the table and are made after the surveys on the area. After the interventions, we have made some questionnaires in the area. The questionnaires are made on 150 people. 19 were residents and the others were passers-by on the area. The results are shown in the table, but what is really important conclusion is the fact that before of intervention, desire to sell the apartment was perceived by 58 people, by more than half of the respondents. After the implementation of preferred typology for organizing the public space, the re-evaluation of the desire to sell the apartment was decreased in 37 people. The same thing. The same thing is done even with the passers-by, where 16 passers-by under the study, which had fulfilled the questionnaire. The results are shown or are presented in the table. What is very important to be emphasized is that the desire to sell the apartment in the area where they live was perceived by 21 people, by less than half of the respondents. The desire to buy an apartment in the relevant area or in the area under the study was perceived by 18 people, by less than half of respondents. The comparison of public space, 47 people see the public space of the area under the study as a bit better, and the re-evaluation of the desire to buy the apartment after the implementation of their preferred typology for organizing of the public space in the relevant area was perceived by 49 people. So it is really important to emphasize the fact that the number of the people who considers the fact of buying an apartment in the area after the intervention is increased after the current interventions in the area. The last slides present all the theoretical references or theoretical background. And now, hoping that I was clear on my presentation, I would like to thank you about your attention.